Save Simon Fraser Football was trending all over the internet last week, and we had Jim Mullen, president of Football Canada, to describe the politics of the decision. Well, football is more than politics. Football is family, and today we had one of the prominent Simon Fraser football families on our show today. The Kremler family, Gideone Kremler, quarterback for Simon Fraser, signed his name to the injunction to reverse the decision. And Lana Kremler, his mom, talks about his life journey and what Simon Fraser University football meant to the entire family. And we want you to join us right here on The Ride with Chevy and Nasty.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Welcome to The Ride with Chevy and Nasty. We're very excited about this week. Our last guest, of course, was Jim Mullen, president of Football Canada, to come on and bring us up to speed on what's going on with Simon Fraser University as they're trying to revive and bring that program back to life. Huge outpouring from the football community across Canada in the past week. But one of the things that I don't think we've talked enough about is some of the people that are involved and how it affects them. And today I'm very excited to introduce to you guys Lana and Gideone Kremler. Gideone, of course, is one of the 5 players who actually went down to the courthouse and filed the court injunction. And again, just as a reminder, guys, all this came down just the week before finals. So we're joined, Gideone and his mom are joining us this week as finals are going on at SFU. Guys, welcome to The Ride. Thanks so much for coming on with us.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, this is great. We're going to get into it right away, but before we get into it, we always talk about great stories and great conversations. When we approached you, Lana, about getting on the show, we didn't realize just how entrenched you, your family, your children are into the fabric of SFU. Tell us a little bit about sort of your involvement with SFU. Obviously, Gideone's your son playing there, but there's a little bit more to it than just one son playing football at college.
Yeah. So we have 5 children, or 6 children. Gideon's the last boy of the family, so he's one of 4 brothers. And his twin brother and him played through, obviously, from the time they were 7 until through high school. And their older brother, Justice, also played football. He's 3 years older than them, so he was just a few steps ahead. And Justice got a scholarship to Simon Fraser University when he graduated from Mount Douglas High School in Victoria, BC. Gideone and Zarek both played on his varsity team. Gideone was a grade 9 quarterback that led that varsity team to the BC Provincial Championship, and they won. And it was really unprecedented, very exceptional to have such a young pivot on a team. Because of that championship, Justice had quite a bit of interest from different universities throughout Canada. And all of the kids had really great grades. They just were really good at school, and he had all of the doors open for him. And he had a couple really influential coaches in his life, Bob Molly, Mark Townsend, Dino Jeremiah, Jay Prepchuk, that were all SFU football alumni. So when Coach Bates called and made him an offer to come play SFU football, he was ecstatic. It was the Stanford of Canada, right? So yeah. It's a great university, and here he is, a scholarship athlete playing in the NCAA Div 2, and like that's the pinnacle of boys playing football, girls playing football through high school. That's their end game, is trying to get a scholarship to a good university.
Well, I remember coming out in Montreal when I started football, and way out east, not too much knowledge west of Toronto, but sort of this mecca of it was like a magical place when people talked about Simon Fraser when you were out east. Like many people that I knew played and went on to the NCAA, and that was Sheldon's path as well. But from out east, remembering that, I came out in the 90s to university. I went to McGill. At that time, the Canadian universities were not giving out scholarships. And I remember Simon Fraser being this unicorn in Canada, that if people could go there, you get the best of all worlds. And I knew a couple of people that had gone through Simon Fraser, but it was really it had a special place in the football I guess hierarchy in Canada. Not only was it a Canadian university in a really, British Columbia is a fantastic province, but it offered scholarships and an opportunity for young football players to actually get their schooling paid for while they were playing football. And I assume that was the experience for you starting off with Justice, right?
Yeah, so Justice accepted right away, was ecstatic, and it's a fantastic university. It's one of the best in the world. It's one of the top comprehensive universities in North America, and so a great education, football legacy, and he was following in the footsteps of coaches that really meant something to him too, right? And so when Gideone and Zarek graduated from grade 12, and they also won their BC Provincial Championship in their grade 12 season. So Gideone bookended his quarterback grade 9 and grade 12 as a BC football varsity AAA champion. They also had a lot of interest from across Canada and from some schools in the United States. And when Coach Ford, who became the head coach the year previous, called them and made them very good scholarship offers. It was very hard earned because they have great grades and they were champions. They were so excited. Like I remember sitting in the living room and they were just pumped to receive that phone call together and to just know that like three brothers were going to be playing on a football team together. Like I'm the mom. I was like, I love that. Could eat it up.
How was that moment? Because, off air before we started recording, you talked about, your football family. There's cousins that play. You guys bought an RV so that you could travel to games, so that you didn't have to drive back. Like, this was not just like, hey, son, go play football. Tell me how the game was, or we'll come watch you on Sunday. You were part of the journey. You were part of the ride, and we're on the ride tonight. But so what's that moment like? Because I can imagine, again, I have three boys, and I don't know what they're going to do, but I don't foresee them all playing on the same sport team at any moment. Right. But I can imagine that's a pretty awesome moment when you know that you could go watch all your three boys playing football on a Sunday or a Saturday
at a collegiate level, right? On TV in the United States, like in California and Washington and Oregon and Texas. It was crazy. We felt so blessed to have that opportunity for our boys to go to Simon Fraser. And I don't want to knock all of their efforts and say that they may not have gone to university without scholarships, because there are good athletes and they had great grades. But as a family that had 6 children, we did not have the financial opportunity to send 3 boys to university. So the financial relief of all 3 of our boys having really good scholarships to one of the best schools in North America was like, for me, it was a mother's dream. For my husband, it was great out of the bank. Like for him, but we've both coached them too. Like I coached Gideone and Zarek when they were really little, and at the time when kids are getting distracted by the butterfly on the field and they're not really into football yet, but they persisted and they kept playing and they kept getting better. And Gideone showed really exceptional qualities as a football player, as an athlete. Period. He was really good at soccer. He was really good at pretty much every sport that he picked up. And so he had a fire for football that the other 2 boys didn't have at the same age. They developed it later, but Gideone had it first. So we had a 9-year-old watching YouTube videos after YouTube videos of as much and digesting football in a way that I had never seen a kid do before. Because when I played football at his age in Winnipeg, we put helmets on. We were told to put our nose on the ball. Like, I don't even remember what my coach's name was. I just knew I was running around with a bunch of boys in November in Winnipeg when it was freezing, and we got hot chocolates later. Like, that's, and now I have a boy that's that age that I remember playing, and he's watching quarterbacks in the NFL and in the CFL, and he's like processing, like a play action, and and then he would go and have these discussions with my husband as a coach, like these really elevated discussions about football, and we were like, oh my God, this kid. And then his brothers caught up to that passion as well, so now he could have those discussions with his brothers. So to watch that progression of, distracted by a butterfly when you're 7 in a field, to watching hours of football footage, to then being a varsity champion twice, and then getting a scholarship to SFU, and then playing down in the States and playing on television. And like, it was just like, the only thing better was if they were going to play in AT&T Stadium, because they played in BC Place, which was also like amazing. And but that's because I'm a Cowboys fan. Sorry if you might get hate for that, but that would be that's the only other thing that would make this football journey for me any better, would be that. And Justice did play in AT&T Stadium with Team BC when he was 16, so I got to watch one of my boys play there. And but Gideon, Zarek, and Justice, all at the same school, all in the same uniform, all out on the field together, all going to workouts in a house with 5 other football players. It was just, for me, my husband and I didn't think that they knew, and maybe they won't know until later, just how special and awesome that experience is and would be for them, later on in their life.
That's an amazing setup to the story, right? Because I call it the tuning fork. Like with some kids, they like to play the game and they're just running around playing the game. But for some kids like Gideon, right, the tuning fork went off at some point, and you're like, this is all I want to do. You are dissecting play action, questioning the calls that they're making on the field or the reads, and that took you through success throughout your high school career. Now, how was it that first day you walked onto Simon Fraser, the school you wanted to go to? You're walking in as a quarterback, surrounded by the top athletes across BC and Western Canada, some Americans. What was that experience like when you walked in that locker room the first time as a player?
I was more than excited, I would say. I felt like for a long time, kind of as we touched on, how much I kind of invested into football and started to learn about football and become a student of the game at a pretty young age. I feel like I was always looking for that next challenge, the next opportunity to kind of try and elevate what I knew and what I had kind of preconceived thoughts of the game. I knew there was more to it, but I didn't really know how to access it yet. There's only so much you can do on YouTube and things like that, right? But I knew being at this level, playing in the NCAA, which again, just to make that point, going from the only province in Canada that plays American football to then get to go to the only university in Canada that plays American football, felt almost too teed up. Like there was a bigger picture there for someone in the beginning of it all. But I was really excited. I wanted to see what the game looked like, what the speed was like at that level, what the athletes I was going to be playing against and competing with looked like. And then even just to touch on that was a shock. I showed up and the 2 guys that were ahead of me on the depth chart were both 6'2", 6'3", and could throw the ball a mile. I can throw the ball a mile, don't get me wrong, but it takes a little bit of effort. I got to put some oomph into it. Those guys can kind of just let it go.
Flies off.
Exactly. They got rubber bands back there for arms. So, but it was super incredible. And then of course, Coach Ford was a huge proponent of me coming there in the first place. So to kind of get to take in his energy and the culture, it was a big theme for him. The culture that he was creating around the team there was very, one, optimistic, but then 2, it pulled you in. There was like certain kind of energy there that was around the team and around the coaching staff that kind of looked past, previous records, previous years, whatever the challenges may be, and we're kind of just really excited to go try and prove something. And so that was the other kind of biggest part about coming to SFU. I was excited to have something to prove that wasn't just the Mount Doug legacy. That wasn't just, Mount Doug's always a good school. They always got a couple great players in there. They're always going to be good, whatever. It's a little bit different when you go to a program that's been shaken up and is a little bit down and see if you can actually try and make an impact there. So that was kind of the other end of my excitement, wanting to see if I could test myself and then see if I was actually going to be able to contribute in the manner that I was hoping I could.
So let's talk about that, because it's one thing to pull into campus and compare yourself with all the other guys and try to figure out where you fit in, right? Talk about your first game experience, whether it was, I don't know if you stepped in at a quarterback or played any special teams, but what was that feeling as you first walked onto an NCAA field?
So it was interesting. Coming out of high school, I was doing my second ACL reconstruction. So I tore it.
Oh, wow.
It in my 10th grade year. Sat out a couple weeks. We weren't sure if it was ACL or MCL. I played out the back end of that grade 10 year on a super limp noodle of a leg. Lost in a JV provincial championship, lost in a quarterfinal game, I think, for the seniors a week later. Or not a week later, a week prior. And then going into my grade 12 year, I tore it actually going to our spring game. So still my grade 11 year, actually. And then rehabbed it enough to the point where I, again, played a season on it this time without an ACL. But I was pretty strong and had done it once before, so I kind of knew what I was expecting. That's part of the reason that year was so incredible for me. It was a little bit of a, not even proving something to myself, but
what you had to what you had to battle just to be there, right?
In there, just psychologically and mentally, as well as the physical side of things. So then coming into
and what year was that, Gideon? What year was that?
That was 2018. Was the second time I did it.
2018.
Yeah, in the summer of 2018, I think. Or summer.
It wasn't technically a second tear. It was a piece of the first surgery that didn't connect, so they had to go in and rewrap it and reconnect it. So it wasn't like a full blown knee again. Yeah. It was
and the important thing.
Yeah, I mean it was. It was still.
When you're in grade 10, ACLs grow back. I mean, you can lose an arm and you're going to grow it back, right? But yeah, no, and that's something. So you battled through a lot of injuries through that early career. Now you're up at the NCAA level. What position did you play when you first stepped on the field and took a live
there
rep?
We go, right? So we get through my first year, and I didn't get much. I was rehabbing for the most part. I think I took my medical red shirt technically that year. Came in my second year, and I think COVID happened at the start of the halfway through the first year. COVID came through, and kind of through COVID, I was only working and training more. Yeah, sorry.
So what happened there? What happened during COVID? How did your season get affected? Because I know in U Sports they ceased competition that year. What was happening? Because obviously a very unique situation with you competing in the NCAA, Canadian school, border regulations. What happened there? That must have been a really tough scenario for your team. Was there a workaround, or was the season canceled?
So this was the lay into it. So that COVID came in the March or the spring of that previous, or that, like, I guess the end.
2020.
Yeah, right? And
2020.
We shut everything down for however long. We weren't allowed anywhere near the school, anywhere near the weight rooms or the field. As they slowly started bringing us back into training, we were like socially distanced out on the field, pretty much just running gassers, just cardio stuff. Because we couldn't touch bags, we couldn't throw footballs, you couldn't use cones because then guys are getting in a lineup behind each other and they're too close. And so we were pretty much running sideline to sideline for a couple months there, just getting the guys out, still being around. But it wasn't the most conducive to, I don't know, progressing as a football player, but it was something. And there was a lot of, like you're saying, there was a lot of places I couldn't do anything. They weren't allowed anywhere near their facilities at that point. So we still viewed ourselves as pretty lucky. And then kind of tying back into that first question there, as we approached our first playing season after that, our first game was in Idaho. As we've talked about a little bit earlier, we're supposed to be down in Idaho. I can't remember the date of it, but literally 2 weeks, a week before we're supposed to fly down there, we're taking team votes on whether we think it's smart to go down there, because travel regulations said there's a workaround. We'd all have to take our tests. We'd have to be back within 72 hours. There was all these things we could do to make it happen, but is that really worth kind of the health risks? And like, how do we all feel about that? How many people are willing to take the tests and, kind of go through that extra hassle? And
vaccinations
and vaccines, right? And so quite literally a week before we were supposed to fly down there and play a Division I program, we were kind of not in shambles necessarily, but scrambling still a little bit to figure out whether or not it was feasible as a program. At the end of the day, everyone decides they want to play, as most young, strappy football players do. And we got on a plane and we head down to Idaho. And Idaho was my first real experience in a NCAA game. So I'm in the dome.
That's
and
the
at the
Vandals.
Vandals.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's Division One. That's
That's what
Div
I'm
One. Your
saying.
first game was Div One.
So,
Oh,
just a
that's
little
awesome.
side note
That's
on
awesome.
that too. My first high school game ever was down in Tacoma, Washington, as a ninth grader with the varsity team. So it wasn't necessarily my first time kind of like with a big shock for my
Wide-eyed.
wide-eyed. Yeah. It
Yeah.
wasn't. So I was a little bit able, and then of course Justice is down there too. So I have my brother there to kind of lean on and be like, hey,
Right.
whoa, this is a lot. He's like, oh, don't worry about it. You'll do fine. You're good, buddy. Like, strap up.
Yeah.
But that game was a fun time. And so kind of like I said earlier, I'd always felt like I had a little bit something to prove. And then especially when you put on the red and white and you're down in the States and you're against a Division One
Yeah.
program, nobody thinks you're really much. But I finished that game with 4 tackles on punt team.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I think we definitely punted the ball quite a bit. Don't get me wrong, but as a first time on the field,
It's more reps
yeah,
for
that's
you,
what
right?
I'm saying. I wasn't too upset. But yeah, first game in to go down there. I'm not even gonna lie to you guys. I beat up on some dudes down there. I held it down for Victoria boys like myself. But it was
There you
super
go.
sick to feel that. Of course, these guys are phenomenal athletes, and of course they got an opportunity here at a Division One program, and all the best to them. But they're still not that much better. You put on a shoulder pad and a helmet, and then you get to see who really wants to be there, who really wants to be a dog, right? And so that was kind of a really cool experience to know, hey, the scoreboard might reflect one thing, but when you get out there on the field, you can kind of feel a different sense of the game. Touchdowns happen at this level. Guys are fast, and offenses are electric, and things break. But when it comes to nose, pads on pads, it's still just football at the end of the day. So that was a huge confidence booster to start kind of the SFU journey.
And that kind of takes back to that mystique of SFU offering a really unique football experience for Canadians. And I think what it's your family and your career is so fascinating. But I think what we want to connect for people is just what your experience at SFU as a student athlete gave to you. Like, I don't think you could be the student without the athlete, and you can't be the athlete without the student. And that school offered not just the opportunity to do both, but in such a unique fashion. Can you speak to that as your years went by? How did you mesh into the fabric? Because your mom alluded to, you're all great students. What was it like to be a student athlete at Simon Fraser as you progressed through your career? You come out of COVID, you got a couple of seasons under your belt. I know that this year you were making a play to be the starting quarterback. Like, you were becoming a presence on campus. You weren't just a wide-eyed rookie playing, against NCAA teams. You were ready to come and compete, but not just compete. You still have to maintain that other part of the deal, which is being the student, because that's what takes you throughout life. Football is, for most, it's a short window, but what you're doing as a student athlete carries you through the rest of your life. So how did you mesh into the fabric there of SFU? And what did that campus, what does that school give to you as a student athlete?
Well, and so kind of just to start that off a little bit, Mom touched on it a little bit earlier, but finding a school that's an NCAA school in Canada that travels down to the States, travels to Washington and Oregon and down to Texas, and plays some of the best competition you can play, kind of on what I said earlier too, on wanting to compete and wanting those challenges, SFU was a no-brainer as a destination school. As much as I love and respect a lot of the coaches across U Sports and some of the teams that I was talking to there, there wasn't a chance, if I'm being completely honest, with what SFU offers in comparison. So we even talked about it a little bit earlier too, money. As we all know, U Sports should cap out at $4,500 in their scholarship, and I don't want to be that guy, but SFU beat that offer, the first offer I got from coming out of high school. And so that, again, was a very real understanding of, like, this is an institution that is involved in something bigger, and they have an opportunity to afford their students an opportunity to be a part of something bigger as well. And so,
and for mom and dad, let's not forget that dollar exchange, because I went the American route back when the dollar was around that 72-cent mark, and it gets pretty expensive for mom and dad, even on a full ride. So here you've got the NCAA experience. And I imagine they had like training table and study table where the athletes get together for their study.
We got study hall and things like that. And so even as we'll get into that too, kind of becoming a part of the community here, that's been huge. So we moved, me, Justice, and Zarek, when we were all on the team in mine and Zarek's first year here, we were in an apartment on campus on the hill. So we were up there every day, enjoying the student life, right, on campus, heading over to the bars and hanging out, getting food together with the guys, and doing the university stuff, but really taking in the fact that we got to live on campus, be up here, be close to everything, be close to all of our friends. And that gave us a really cool opportunity to be at where we're at now. I'm doing this interview in my buddy Flynn's room. He's got a whole set of plants behind him on the wall here. He's from Oregon. I've known him for 2.5 years now, but he'll be a friend of mine for as long as I'm around, as long as he's around. But the opportunity that we had here to kind of create a family and a sense of community not too far away from the island too. And so that was another big deciding factor on coming here, was it was close to home, and I could still go home and see mama every once in a while and get a dinner, but I was able to be secure and confident in growing a new life out here in Vancouver. And then
can I ask this question?
Go.
Sorry, because you mentioned your roommate from Oregon. How many players on the team would be Canadian versus American? Because that would be a unique mix too. Because U Sports team are primarily Canadians. Maybe, when I was at McGill, we might have had one or two Americans max. And I'm sure when Sheldon was down at Iowa State, he was probably the Canadian kid, right?
Yeah.
What is it like there? Is it affording an opportunity for a lot of Americans to come and experience Canada for the first time? Because that's unique too, right? Like, that they offer that.
100%. Our split is pretty, I wouldn't say even, but it's pretty close, and it definitely varies year to year. So right now we're probably looking like 65-35 Canadian to American, but in my first year here was probably a lot closer to 60-40, 55-45. And just kind of happens on the recruiting cycles and what they're looking for each year. But we get a lot of guys from Washington, a lot of guys from Oregon. We've had guys out from Alaska, Australia, California is a big one too. But they really go out of their way to try and give some guys an opportunity that aren't necessarily getting the looks they maybe should across the border, but then also giving guys on this side of the border a chance too. But there's been a couple, not like turnover rate, but each year you can kind of see it flip flop a little bit. Like you can see when they got a couple guys from Oregon that all kind of knew each other and saw them coming down here. But another good one too is the JUCO guys that'll come out. There's a lot of JUCO guys that hear about SFU, and kind of like you're talking about it, kind of as this like magical like fairy tale land where they could get some decent living conditions and maybe earn a scholarship while they're over here, and kind of take them out of whatever situation they're kind of grinding through right now. They kind of look at SFU as a place of opportunity, which I think most, if not all, the people that come here do. And we talk about the academic side of things here and kind of the prestige of SFU as an institution and as a school, as a place to put on your resume, right? It holds some value and holds quite a bit of weight, especially for the guys down south. So in Canada, I feel like kind of the attitude's a little different. SFU maybe doesn't get as much respect as it should. But when you talk to guys from the States and they talk about getting a degree from SFU versus, I'm not going to throw a singular school out there, but any of the other schools in our Lone Star Conference right now, SFU is light years ahead of each of those institutions, just in terms of kind of the weight a degree from that school carries. The academics.
But then if we talk football, SFU historically has the highest number of draft picks in the CFL, which make it also a really, it's not we don't like to call it a pipeline, but if someone actually dreams of taking their sport that they love to the next level, you want to go somewhere where you're noticed. I know in Quebec, Laval, the resurgence or the creation of the Laval program in the 90s, which is not that old, to the Canadian powerhouse that they are. It's also because they attract so many great players. They have such a great program, and players that go there know that that's sort of not a quick, but you're going to get noticed there. Just like here in Calgary, where Sheldon and I live, University of Calgary is, I believe it's the second most, or maybe the most.
There now,
And so, you look at these three schools, University of Laval, University of Calgary, and then Simon Fraser playing in the NCAA, that offers an opportunity that can't be overlooked for athletes, because you want to go where you're going to get noticed. And if you want to dream big, and take it by the horns, you've got to go somewhere, and that's precisely what it's offering you as well, right?
And so, kind of touched on that too. A big part of the decision to come here was, of course, school. School was definitely one of the first and foremost ones. We've talked about how we value school, and we got to make sure our grades are up, and we know that's kind of the end. That's the end of it all. Once football is done, right? It's what do you fall
Right.
back on? What have you learned? What are you
Yeah.
willing to, and take endeavors into and stuff like that. Um, but building kind of the community up here at SFU and kind of acknowledging that there's a lot more to SFU than just one specific thing or the other. The kind of the mesh that it builds in terms of opportunity for school or opportunity for athletics, the travel experiences. I'm not going to say, I like to say the living conditions, because we get an amazing house, and we all love where we live right now. But I know some people don't feel the same.
But everybody
Yeah,
lives like you,
I would
right?
hope so.
Everybody lives like you. So,
But it's Vancouver. Come on, it's one of the
Yeah.
best cities in Canada to
no
live
kidding.
in.
Yeah. But here you are. So you've battled through the adversity. You've got good parents, supportive parents. You've battled through those tough years. You made it to the school of your dreams. You go down there and experience NCAA football. You're keeping your grades up. You've built that community that only a school like Simon Fraser can offer. And I'm literally getting like goosebumps right now talking about this. Then you get called into the auditorium. Tell us about that.
That's a tough one. I mean,
I might cry.
yeah.
Oh, I'm shaking right
Well, we're
now.
going to ask you the question next, Mama. So we're going to start with Gideon. We're going to go back to Mama.
But did you have any inkling or any rumors why you guys were getting called in? Because that's a strange meeting to be called on the spot.
So
like that.
I have a couple buddies that work in and around the school that will hear things here and there, and what we had assumed, like we hadn't heard anything. We didn't know. There was no direction. No one had a hint of what was going on. What we assumed,
No rumors.
yeah, no rumors. What we assumed was that our 2024 season was going to be confirmed as either not happening, or maybe they're taking a year to figure some things out, or whatever it may be. That was that was like as far as we had went, making speculations about what possibly was going to go on. Because again, you don't get an email from the president of your school to come in for a meeting in a lecture hall that you've only been in 3 times since your time being at SFU. Those things don't happen normally. So you already know that it's going to be something bigger than just a team meeting. And then to tie into that, you're calling this meeting the week that finals and exams are all starting. So clearly something's gone pretty south. Clearly someone's, looking to not necessarily get ahead of anything, but get something out before it's too late, before people go home or whatever.
Or
Right.
it leaks out. To
Yeah,
the public.
yeah, who knows, right? But yeah, and so none of us knew. And so we get that email the night before. And then you walk to the auditorium, and there's a couple security guards waiting outside. There's a couple faces you don't recognize or haven't really seen. And then you see your coaches, and the look on your coach's face isn't very good. And so that's kind of like when you look up at mom and dad and you see that they're scared a little bit, and you go, oh, maybe something's actually not good right now. And so we all took our seats pretty comfortably. A group of 60 football guys. The guys start joking. We're having an all right time as it is. But pretty quickly that was shot down. Pretty quickly the tone in the room becomes pretty somber and pretty heavy. And quite fast, you start to feel like something's wrong, like something's missing, or, did I do something wrong? Did we do something wrong? Is something going to come out here that someone on the team, this, that, or the other? But then the politicking starts, and you start to feel like, okay, wait, so where is this going to go? Where are we being led right now? You start getting led down this rabbit hole in this conversation where nobody wants to talk about this. Everybody feels bad about the situation. Nobody's feeling good about what's going on in that room right now. But we're still waiting for the kick. We're still waiting to get punched in the stomach. We're still waiting for a bomb to drop. And I think that was probably part of the tougher part too, was sitting through that entire meeting, waiting, and then feeling like I never really got an answer. So as your stomach drops further and further, and as you start to get a little more sick, and you're starting to sweat a little bit more as you start to take in the magnitude of the situation and you start speculating. You're waiting for a clear, concise kind of, here's your direction, here's where we would like you to go, here's why. And instead, you're kind of left with a feeling of doubt, a feeling of mistrust, a feeling of not being wanted, right? You have guys in that room that are breaking down in tears,
Crying.
bawling
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
they don't know. They're confused, they're sad, they're angry. They feel left out. They feel like people aren't caring for them. Our coaching staff loves every guy on this team, but what can they say or do in that moment, right? Everyone's feeling
Nothing.
Everyone's feeling all these emotions, and the people you would normally look to kind of help ease those feelings aren't really there, right? We're all kind of
Right.
everyone's kind of handcuffed to their own situation.
Still trying to process and put this all
And they're
together.
not answering questions straight
Yeah.
up either.
Yeah.
Like, so they're being asked questions and they're being really evasive, and so that only makes you feel less
Yeah.
wanted. It starts messing with your mind. Like, you got to remember, some of those boys had to walk out of the room and go write an
So
exam
I was
an
just
hour
going to say,
later.
just to preface that, I woke up that morning knowing I had a group or a term project due later that day that I'd been working on for the past couple of weeks. And like that day was supposed to be my like final touches day where I do the last little bit of citations, annotations, and get it all kind of ready to go. And then I didn't leave the school until 4 p.m. that day. You know, I'm out in the locker room, hanging out with some guys, just talking, seeing how they're doing. Guys are talking about what they may or could not do, how their school's about to finish up with all this going on. Like,
and that's nuts because everything we talked about in that first half hour about becoming ingrained and embedded in the culture and the history of Simon Fraser and what it means to be a student athlete, what it means to be on a team where your brothers both played, on a team that mom and dad got to watch. That all ends with that conversation, without any sort of consultation, without any sort of opinion. So at what point do we call mom? And at what point does mom get her opportunity to react to this? Because that we talked about moms and dads' dreams for their children, and finally realizing them. And it's not just about football, but we said it. You can't have the student experience without that athlete experience for you. Some kids, that's their life. They are students. They're not athletes. So, but you are a student athlete, and that's how you excel. That is your comfort zone that many people don't have. So at what point do you let mom and dad know and break the news?
Right. And so what's so tough about that too is because there was such a coupling of the decision there, like the school and the football, it only could happen with both of them. Right. If another school was offering a similar education with an opportunity to go play SFU football or NCAA football, then there's maybe a little bit of decision to be had there. But those two things together made that decision so easy, right? Like, I love the school, I love the football, but I needed both. And so to find a place that has both was incredible. And to kind of have that, in a sense, feel like it's stripped away, right? Or taken away or cut out from under you, whatever, pulled the rug, however you want to phrase it, was obviously tough. But that morning, the night before, we see some Twitter articles come out, some media links, and my mom texts me, "Hey, have you seen what's posted on Twitter? Is everything okay?" And I was the one to be like, "Oh no, like there's no way.
It's
like,
fine.
If anything, it'll be this, and this." And like I said, if anything, it would be that they're cutting 2024. It's going to be a wrap. Who knows what happens after? Maybe not necessarily was that expected, but that was obviously none of us are. I don't say none of us are dumb, but all of us knew that finding a place to play was going to be difficult. And so when we heard that Lone Star dropping us in 2024, that's something you're aware of. Maybe it doesn't work out. Worst case scenario, we don't have a season, whatever it may be. And so we sat on that pretty hard. And then it was the following morning as well. My mom messages me as I'm going to the meeting. "Hey, it sounds like they're going to cut the program. Are you sure? Like, have you heard anything yet? Have you talked to anyone yet?" And I go, no, mom, there's no way. Like, come on, I'm about to go to the meeting right now. I'll call you after once I figured out what's going on. But I'm pretty sure 2024 is gone. that should be the most of it. It shouldn't be that bad. And that was kind of the last thing I said. And then I was sitting in that meeting, and I think I texted you while I was in the meeting. I can't remember. I might have waited till after, but I think I texted you while I was in there and said, pardon my language, but everything's going to shit. Something along those lines, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, we'd heard, like, I think there was a media leak the night before that said, oh, big announcement coming from SFU at noon or something. And so I texted him, and he's like, nah, nothing. And like you said, he has friends that work in and around the school that are also athletes. So I had their ear to the ground, and there was no inkling from anybody. And again, just to reiterate what Gideone said, our worst case scenario going in our heads was that, 2024, we don't have a place to play. There's, some, ambiguity as to how that season's going to go forward, that kind of stuff. And so that was literally our worst case scenario in our head.
And you expect them
So Lana, what's the
ahead.
first thing that went
Sorry.
through your so what's the first thing that goes through your head? Because you're the mom that's been driving that RV up and down on the ferries and across islands and rivers and streams for the last 5 years. What's the first thing that went through your head when you heard the announcement?
So Gideone texted from the meeting and said everything's going to. Well, he said more than everything's going to shit, but I won't. I'll reframe.
I think everybody kind of gets the point.
Yeah, and in cap letters too, and you know how hard that is to do. So he and I was really confused, and so because we had worst case scenarios 2024, but I had the same feeling, like a pit in your stomach, like just rug being pulled out from under you, all of confusion. And I actually thought something bad happened, because he didn't tell me what had happened. He just said everything's going to shit. And so I thought, so in my dramatic brain and cinematic brain, I'm like, did a kid do something? Has a coach been something? Like, what is going on? Like, I was so worried for the team and worried for a coach or a family, or like, I just was, sick, thinking something really, really bad had happened. Yeah. And then he's still in the meeting, and SFU puts out their press release right at noon, and he's still in that meeting. Wow. And so I get a notification on Twitter that the whole football program's being canceled for the 2023 season, and I bawled. I just started crying. I couldn't. It was just so shocking to me. And I know it sounds like, on one hand, I was really happy someone didn't die or something really bad didn't happen in that way, on one hand. But on the other hand, I was like, what? How could... I just was so shocked that nobody knew, that there was no rumors, that, like, I have friends that are on faculty up there. Like, no one knew nothing. We were completely blindsided. And then I really wept, because I imagined, I know about 20, 30-ish kids on the team. Yeah. And I imagined them all sitting in this lecture hall as little boys. I just pictured them as like 9-year-old football players, the ones that I coached. I could put all of them to that age, and knowing how hard all of them had worked to be sitting in that chair at that moment, and then just have it like poof, just taken away. And I just bawled, and I texted Gideone probably 35,000 times after that point, and was just like, call me, I need to talk to you, I just want to hear your voice, how are you feeling, like, over and over and over again. And Gideone's text to me, I actually should probably read it. He just said, Mama, stop, I'll call you when I can, and I'm okay. And that's all he said. And I was like, okay, I'll just wait. And then I just started reading stuff, just going on Twitter, going on Instagram, looking up as much stuff as I could on the news, and just trying to get a sense of, did other people know that this was going on? Like, were we just the idiots? That kind of thing. And then started to read the stuff from SFU football alumni, and wept more, because here's men that have put decades into a football program, that their friend group is that football program, and they're losing their minds. And I just, like, I'm kind of all over the place. But that group of men, I am so grateful to, and I know that the football team is too. They have just jumped on this and are phenomenal. And those men don't just love SFU football; they love football, and they know how much football means to all of Canada and what the sport means to kids. And that's why they're all coaches in the community and at different levels. And they just jumped on it so fast. And within 12 hours of that announcement, I already felt like a glimmer of hope.
Yeah,
like already.
you know,
Because of the football
just from
alumni.
the outreaching of support.
now,
Yeah.
now, Lana,
And then
I was going to ask you this
Yeah.
because I mean, three of four of us in this conversation are parents, and you know, my boys are a little younger, and Sheldon's as well. But you know, anytime you send your children off, right? You said you picture them as 9-year-olds. My kids, I always picture as little guys. But anytime you send them off to do something, whether it's you know an activity, to school. If they're driving in a car, right, there's this level of trust and this level of letting go as a parent that you have to practice, right? And
Yeah.
trust that on the other end of that bridge they're crossing, there's someone that will at least put that same level of care into them because you're allowing them the opportunity to have your child in their life. And I see that with my children. And so what I'm seeing here is a huge betrayal in that trust, right?
Yeah.
How can you put that into words? And again, it's the leadership of that school has a responsibility not only to the student athletes but to the families that trust their children to attend that school. Can you put that into words what that felt? Because obviously the losing the football team is one thing, and that's you know when you weep for the opportunities for those young men, you understand and empathize with the guys that have been through that program, that SFU football meant their life. But as a parent, you sent 3 of your boys to this school. And you trusted, whether it's the athletic director, the president, every person at that school, you've trusted them with your children to on the other end that they're going to send them back to you with a positive experience. And this is the furthest thing from
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, so now I've got tears. So when I talked to Gideon after it was over, and he told me he was okay, and I asked about his mental health immediately and the boys on the team, because finals and exams were literally starting that day, and I know how stressful university is, and to get those papers done and to go into a final exam. And now you had 65, 68 boys, young men, that are going to have to navigate this end of a school year with this crazy thing, that trauma. It's a trauma. It's a betrayal.
Yeah.
That had just happened to them. And not only are they in that room, but then they leave and they go and they've got, half an hour to get all their stuff out of a locker room that's going to finally get locked, because it hadn't been locked all year. And and they're trying to console each other, and they've got no one. So they didn't make an announcement and then say, hey guys, we know this is a shock. We've invited like 6 counselors here.
Yeah.
To kind of sit with you and talk through it. Take all the time you need in this lecture hall to kind of digest this. We'll be open for, you know what I mean? Like, there was none of that. There was no kind of consolation of trauma. Like, there's nothing there. And so you're talking about entrusting your child to a university or to a schooling, but you're entrusting an adult, right? So you want your children to be able to navigate these hardships of adult life, right? But you also want the people that are responsible for inflicting the trauma to take responsibility for some of it. And so when I'm talking to Gideon and he's trying to console me, crazy, because he knows how much I love football and how much it meant to me, and he's almost like deferring his own kind of pain or anguish and like making sure mom's okay and dad's okay. And he's like, and I'll figure it out. And he was very calm, and it was really reassuring. And then I saw the video. He's like, we videoed it. They told us not to, but we did anyways. And watching that video of them just treating them without any care is what it was. Yeah. Like there was no attention to care or concern. It was all about them and protecting themselves and protecting their administration,
layoffs,
right?
Wow.
And it was all about business. And then you've got these 19, 20, 21, 22-year-old young men in the room going, what was the catalyst? Like, we get it. It's a business decision. But how did you do? And then not answering them and being so dismissive. And so as a parent, that's when I lost it. I got so angry, so hurt. And I thought, if I'm this hurt watching these young men, my children, be treated this way by the administration, I can't imagine how these young men feel
with no
so
life
dismissed.
No life experience to back that up on, right? They don't know even, you can't even understand your options. You said something interesting. They didn't have any counselors there, but I promise you there was a couple of lawyers there.
Yes, there was.
Listening to what making sure that everything was on board and proper. And again, I get the importance of that to any large organization, academic institution. Yeah, that's a real consideration on their part, but just to leave the kids hanging like that.
And I'll add this
with no answers.
I'll add this, Sheldon. I was gonna, if I could
just
add this before getting, again, I'm thinking about any football team I've ever been on, and I'm kind of emotional about this too, because what I see here, and first of all, Lana and Gideone Kremler joining us. Gideon played for the SFU team, and
he's still playing.
He's going to be playing again, and Lana's his mom, and just what I'm noticing for this, why I'm a little bit emotional, is because I've played on so many teams, and you guys have all played, and I'm sure on your team there are kids, and they don't. Sheldon said no life experience. You go from high school, you go play there. Some of those guys don't have the mom to call or the dad to call. I'm sure there's some kids there that this was their way out of wherever they were, and this is gone with little counseling, little direction, and they go back to where they came from. Which for a lot of them, it's not going hanging out with mom and dad in the RV, going up and down with the big family. They're on their own, back wherever they came from, and that's a sad statement from the university.
You've entrusted,
and that's why I cried.
You've entrusted 5 years of your life, 4 to 5 years of your life, to be somewhere, to make something of yourself in that 4 to 5 years of allotted time, and then not necessarily the only reason you're there, but the only reason you got an opportunity to go there, right, is through football. That's the only reason you got a look or a scouting to come to SFU in the first place and even realize that it could maybe be an option. And then now you've been here for 2 years. Your family moved while you were gone, so they're not in the same big house they were in. They sold their car and they downsized to a smaller car. And you're sitting there with your piece of junk that you had in the 11th grade, and you go, okay, well, now what? And so I had that conversation with my mom too. And for me, even who's in quite a good position in terms of being able to navigate this kind of trouble, there was very much a feeling of like, okay, what was this all for? Right. And to have that feeling as someone who's living hundreds of miles away from where your home is, and mom and dad aren't a ferry trip away, I can't imagine sitting with those thoughts, at 2 and 3 in the morning that night after you finished your final exam or your final paper. And then you got to remember that that's what you're going through currently. That was quite sickening. And then just to finish that thought off, what was really hard too is that SFU preaches the student experience. They preach that SFU, and kind of like we talked about, SFU offers some things that no other school in the world could offer you. We're living on a mountain, right? You're an international school in Canada, the only one playing in the NCAA. There's things here that they offer that no schools can compare to. And then they use that as a tool to recruit people and to ask people to come and to have people come represent their institution and
get donors,
right?
Yeah, that's right.
And then I feel like a really hard part of this whole situation is kind of like we touched on before, the student, and obviously student athlete, but the student experience even is feeling like it kind of got thrown to the curb for whatever bigger reasons there may or may not have been. But there's definitely a sense and a feeling of, okay, well, I've been getting told all these great, amazing, awesome things about what I can do with my time here and how I'm going to be able to spend my time here. And now it looks as though just being here is all right. Just that the fact that we'll pay out your scholarship for the rest of your school, like that should be good enough, right? And
Yeah.
it's like, well, no, we
Yeah.
came here for exceptional. SFU is an
Right.
exceptional institution. The
Yeah.
legacy is
Well,
exceptional.
that's what was on the brochure and the
Exactly.
contract that
Yeah,
I signed,
exactly. Right.
Yeah. So let me ask you this then. So I've been cut. I've made that first crying phone call to my mom before. Even with my first tryout with the Edmonton Elks, I got cut. It's a hard feeling. So what I do is I get together with my buddies, have a laugh, have a cry, toast to the future, start dreaming again. But what I've never done is had one too many shots or beers and said injunction.
So
Where did this come from?
Actually, we talked about that earlier about how they had a couple extra people in that room. Glenn Orris is an alumni from SFU football. He played in 1965 to 1969, if I remember correctly. And he is a very prominent lawyer in BC and I think throughout Canada as well. I think he's a criminal defense lawyer. He heard about the meeting we were having and actually showed up at the lecture hall that we were supposed to have that meeting in for 11:30 or 12 o'clock or whenever it was.
11:30.
Well, yeah, right. And because he wanted to support and he had a feeling, that maybe having someone there to kind of hear this out and see where they're coming from that isn't just a coach or a player would probably be pretty beneficial. So shout out to Glenn Orris, is an amazing person, has been helping incredibly throughout this whole situation, along with numerous other alumni. But he was in that lecture hall with us at 11:25 before they started that meeting. And I don't know, I'm not going to speak to why or what maybe was said. But what I do know is that the security that were at the lecture hall there tried to have Glenn Orris removed from the lecture hall before we started that whole conversation.
Yeah.
So that's where things get really interesting. It's because now there's someone here who only wants to support us, who's only here to see the student athletes and their successes and wants to do as much as he can to bring success to this institution as a whole, right? To everybody that's there. And is a very prominent person in the community too, right? Like a lot of people know him. I'm sure the people in that room knew who he was. So then you start to ask some questions about how the other side's feeling, what their kind of intuitions are of the situation. And so that's why I try not to speculate too much, but I'm forever grateful that he was there. And I'm incredibly grateful that he's still here with us and helping kind of this process. And so I think the injunction might have been an idea he started coming up with throughout that lecture. Maybe, just maybe. I don't know. But
Yeah.
So you,
But and then
I was just going to say,
Kevin.
so we know that online, the Save SFU football hashtag was trending and it was growing. It was supported by a lot of football fans across Canada, a lot of alumni. There was a petition circulating. But in the meantime, sort of underneath that public face of Save the Football Team, there's a calculated plan to get this decision reversed. And you had to, and I'd like you to explain what the process was, but you had to assemble with some of your peers and make a very tough decision to put your name on something that means more than just playing football. It means and could put you at odds with basically the institution that you gave your last 5 years to. So how did that come about? Because you were one of the people that signed that was named in the injunction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I am a plaintiff in the case. What was definitely hard about that is putting your name to anything out in the public is always tough, right? You're opening yourself up to scrutiny. It stays there forever now that the internet's there, right? It's not going anywhere. But I think a crucial and a key piece of it is it's not about fighting anyone. It's not about, proving anything to anyone, but rather finding a way to remedy a situation that could have and should have been handled differently. So regardless of the negative connotations around how it was handled, there were simple ways that it could have been done better. And then so I think getting an acknowledgement of that is something that not just myself, but something that I want our team to hear. But I think the biggest part, the biggest part is it's about the community and what football offers and kind of what it does. And then in turn with that, how football allowed me and the four other guys that are named on the case, but as well as our entire team, what football has afforded us in terms of schooling and opportunity in terms of life, where we go after the 4 or 5 years we maybe play or maybe not play. Who knows? You could ride the bench for 4 or 5 years. That doesn't mean that the experience and being around there, the qualities and work ethics that you picked up throughout that time aren't still valuable. But you lose those opportunities when something like this happens. You lose the opportunity to meet the alumni that would then get you a job after you graduate. You lose the opportunity to maybe think of a business idea with another one of your teammates because you're both studying economics together. You miss those opportunities to not only continue building friendships and connections, but then also kind of the trajectory of where you're supposed to go with kind of the idea you had,
In life.
right?
And
get to
you lose the
university.
opportunity to mentor future athletes coming up, where you can lend your experience to them. I mean, any alumni that I've ever met when I was at McGill, I've benefited because they were there before me, and I've helped out many guys that were playing way after me. And that's a crucial piece to human development is the ability to mentor someone that's like-minded, and you can say, you know what, I lived what you're living, and I can help you. Right. You know, whether it's parenting, whether it's playing football, and you get robbed of that experience too. Right. So, yeah, I understand. And so that injunction was filed, I believe, last Thursday or last Wednesday. Sheldon and I spoke to Jim Mullen right after it was filed. And we haven't heard anything from the university since. Right. And I assume they're probably more silent because of the injunction. But it was about 2 weeks of a period between them giving you the news, sort of the tidal wave of support for the football team, and we haven't heard a statement edgewise from them, right?
No, we're yet to hear anything. I know we have some meetings happening throughout the course of this week with some prominent alumni figures that we have kind of heading the conversations that we're hoping to have in this next week. But I know we got a couple of meetings with the school on a very not personal basis, but in a very closed off sense, where obviously it's not an article, it's not going to be something that's posted anywhere, but hopefully we gain some knowledge, and hopefully the direction of where this is going right now doesn't keep spiraling as I feel like it is right now. You know, we'd love to rein some things in. I think a big topic of kind of the aim that us as players and our alumni are taking with the injunction, but even without the injunction, is that we'd love to work with the school in fixing the situation. We'd love to work with the institution and finding a way to give guys a place to play, to give guys a place to finish their school, to give guys a place to, finish off what they started, but then also finish off what was promised to them, what they signed a contract for,
Well, how about build into the future? I mean, is this so? If the injunction is resetting the status quo, basically, okay, now you rescind the canceling the football program for 2023. Does that force them into or pressure them into negotiations with other conferences, looking at independent routes, looking at U Sports, or is this just really just mean that 2023 season now is still supposed to go
So it's
forward?
interesting. The aim from what I've garnered and kind of the way our alumni association and the people who are fighting to get this program back, kind of the direction they're taking is first and foremost to get the program reinstated, and then to kind of work backwards from there. So the Lone Star is obviously affiliated with the NCAA, so they're trying to stay relatively impartial on the situation. They don't want to speak too personally to anything. I know personally that they would love to have us back. There are teams out there that could maybe fill a game, but the majority of those teams in that conference won't be able to fill a middle of the season bye week at this point in time. It's a little bit late. So I'm sure they would still have us back out there, although they have made statements, not necessarily saying otherwise, but maybe countering that to some degree. So I know we would still most likely have, even if it wasn't a full Lone Star schedule, we'd probably still have some games with the Lone Star. But then as we've seen online too, the support from U Sports and CanWest specifically, and then even the NAIA, is quite prominent. And so I think the most realistic route would probably be some type of independent season where we're just filling up a schedule and we get guys games to play and film to have on tape, and then kind of see where the next year takes us. But getting the program reinstated first and foremost, and getting the school behind it again is going to be the big first step that I think after that dominoes start to fall in a positive way rather than a spiraling way like they have recently.
So
Can I speak to that too a little bit before you ask a question? So I'm part of the SFU Parent Boosters, and so we've been on social media as much as we could, trying to raise awareness. We work with the alumni and basically do anything that they ask us to do to help all of our kids that are on the team, and we try to come up with ideas on our own to just kind of keep it kind of top of mind. That we have a lot of American kids on the team and a lot of American families, and so for a little while they were feeling a little bit left out of the conversation when everyone's like, U Sports. Right. I love U Sports. My kids love U Sports. We all of the kids that he played with that got scholarships went to Calgary, went to Western, went to Queens, UBC, Regina, Laurier. So, we cheer for all of those teams, and it would be great if SFU joined U Sports. We'd love it. We'd definitely be supportive. It's just at the time when he was recruited, he was like, NC2A Div 2 sounds fun. Traveling to the States sounds fun. If that changed in the future, we're 100% behind that. The best part, I think, as this goes forward with the injunction, and then, like Gideon was saying, the dominoes kind of fall after that point. Get the program reinstated, and then work with the administration to bring them on board. I don't think they really understood or knew or maybe even believed how impactful Simon Fraser University football was and is to the community. I don't think they believed or thought for a moment that you'd have Amar Doman, on television and in interviews going, tell me how I can help. If it's about money, I'll write a check. If you need, tell me what you need from me, and I'm all in. I don't think they thought Randy Ambrosie would be writing a letter to CanWest and to U Sports saying, hey, let's try and figure out how we can make this work. I don't think that the Simon Fraser University administration thought that it was going to garner that kind of response from the football world across Canada, from CFL teams and CFL players and football alumni and faculty members from Simon Fraser University themselves, from just SFU alumni, people that just went to the school that used to cheer for the football team. And Coach Jay Triano from basketball, Coach, on behalf and talking about his best friends being on the football team. So you have all of these things at play. You have this one piece of a legal injunction that is just meant to kind of push the narrative of take us seriously and let's see how we can fix this together. And what do you need from us? What do you need from us as the greater football community? What did you feel that was missing that you thought that you could just axe this program and there would be no backlash? So I think that's more kind of like the quality of the injunction.
I was going to say, I got a
Well, I was just going to say, I think, yeah, you go ahead, Jeff.
I was going to say, I got a couple more questions before I let you go. I know we've been on and we kind of gone a little bit for longer than an hour. I guess
part two.
Well, you know what? This is a part two. The third one we're going to do is with an alumni. Because this story is big, and we want to make sure that it gets the proper amplification that we can do. But we talked to Jim last week, and one of the things that came up in our conversation was that across Canada, the football community has been quite siloed in terms of the way they operate. Everyone operates in their own little silo, and they do their own thing. And you're both seeing firsthand just this community come together. How has that made you feel in sort of this really dark part of your career, which, we can't sugarcoat it. You still don't have a team to play for. The decision has not been reversed. As of right now, there is no team at Simon Fraser, but just seeing the tremendous amount of support, from the football community, as you mentioned, and even outside, how has that made you feel?
It's been electric, for lack of better words to explain, but it's been incredible knowing I could open up my Twitter or my Facebook and and start reading support comments through and through and through it further than I could ever roll and scroll is not only phenomenal, but like really kind of puts into perspective what not just football, but SFU as an institution has done across Canada. There's a post in the Facebook group for SFU alumni, and it just listed all the guys that are coaching and a part of sports and BC high school football or anywhere across Canada that are SFU alumni. And there was probably 60 or 70 names on that list. And I recognized probably 20 of them just through a quick glance. But then you go on Twitter and you see that aside from that, there's people from coaching staffs that I've never talked to or never met commenting or retweeting things that I've commented and retweeted on, sharing their opinions and not just sharing, right? Actually putting in their own value and their own opinion on the situation, hoping that their audience that they can reach will also feel either a similar type of way or at least take that opportunity to then reach out and make a statement as well, has been incredible. We talked about Amar Doman earlier as well, but there's not the big names are incredible. Farhan has been incredible. Amar has been incredible, right?
Yeah. Farhan,
there's been people out there that are
Blue
right,
Bombers.
the Blue Bombers that are Solomon Aluminian, right? Guys that are using their platform
I just saw that today,
incredibly well. And like I'm more than grateful. But then there's other people, like I'm reading comments and it was someone who said, I worked like at the school just as a part of their labor union, and they were saying how they watched the Shumble games each year. They're just a football fan, didn't really have anybody on the team that they knew, didn't super care for SFU or UBC football, but just wanted to watch football. And like that's a moment that they stick with, that they remember when they think about their university experience. And so now they're on Facebook or on Twitter reaching out and saying those things. So there's this crazy end of it where it's like, here's who this is affecting, here's how this is hurting X, Y, and Z. And then there's a whole nother side of it too, where it's just like, guys, what were we doing? Like this was something that didn't have to go this far. There's so much positive reinforcement here. There's so many people positively affected by this program and by this institution. And it starts somewhere. And football is a big root in that. It's a big community builder. It's a big party for anyone that wants to come to the games, right? It's a super easy way to build friends if you're on the team.
Yep.
Or even just around the team.
It's the biggest sport too. Like the diversity of a football team is phenomenal. You've got all economic standings, all demographics represented, all races, ethnicities, gender, right? Right? And so you have like this huge diversity, and then with the diversity of the football team comes the diversity of their family and their fan group. It's a phenomenal opportunity and for people to participate in something that's not part of maybe their regular everyday life. And so you have these big names that have, put forward all their thoughts and their positivity towards Simon Fraser University. And then, like Gideon said, you guys, people that works there or people that went there for 2 years or an international student or someone that competed against an SFU team, right? Or came up to the campus. And you got all of those voices too.
Well, I'll tell you, I try to stay optimistic. I've really been touched. I love seeing the country come together around you guys right now. I've got some inner skeptic in me that if the powers that be want to close down a program, you know what, that's their intent to do. But I think what our intent right now, I don't have any connection with Simon Fraser University other than I was a big Glenn Suter fan. And that was one of the schools on my list if I didn't go, the route that I went down to the States. So I think our job right now, guys, is just let's keep this story out here. I love what you guys are doing. I understand so much more about the situation and what you guys are doing, mostly because I now understand who the people are behind this now. I love the courage. I love the actions that you guys are taking. This in itself, let's say it doesn't work out, this in itself is one of those life lessons, much like football, that's going to carry you well into your business career. So, again, Gideon, Lana, I want to thank you so much again for coming on our show and give the last words to you guys. Is there any last message you want to put out for anybody that's watching this or listening to this?
You go first, Mama.
I love football. I love football. I want you to say something. I just love the game. I love the sport. I love that from the time your kid is 7, 5, 6 and playing flag all the way through to senior varsity, junior varsity, senior varsity, and then into collegiate football. And then professionally, I love football. And I know that others a lot of kind of stigma around aggressive sports, for lack of a better way to say it, sometimes. But it's a great outlet for children to, show their strengths and to work together as a team. And every body type is represented on a football team, and every type of kid is represented on the football team. You need your thugs, you need your strategic, general.
Your fakers,
you need, so I love football, and to see a program getting taken away that is potentially an opportunity for kids across Canada and the United States to participate in is heartbreaking to me. And that's really all that I have left to say. I think Gideon will be able to go forward in the future regardless of what the outcome is. He'll find a way because he's a smart boy, he's intelligent, he's cute. He's a cute kid. and people generally like him. So I know he'll find his way, and I know a lot of boys will. But like you said earlier, there are kids there that don't have support systems, that don't have the money, that don't have an opportunity to continue in education. And education is first and foremost. You're a student first. And that's why we say student athlete and not athlete student. So that's my last 2 cents. And Gideon, I think it's really important for you to say how you feel.
I don't know, to wrap things up a little bit here. I think that one of the big things we got to remember and focus on is actually, which is interesting, we didn't touch on this. There's a lot of physical hurt that goes on with football, right? There's a lot of pain and trauma that you deal with physically. We had a kid quite literally break his leg in our spring camp that we just had before we found out that this was all getting canceled. Wow. So that's the very real side of the physical side of football, and what something like this decision, how it can and how it has affected people already. But then I think a really big part of it too is to understand and to garner and to kind of fathom where this puts a lot of people like me mentally, and then kind of for the next course, for the next chapter of their life. There's a lot of people that get kind of put down or get down on their luck or deal with tough situations and are, some would say, unlucky in regards to others. But there's a big piece of this situation right now that feels like it's either intentional or it's neglectful. There's kids like me that are really not just sad or angry, but really confused, really hurt, and not necessarily broken, because a lot of us will bounce back and we'll figure a way to pick up the pieces and keep it moving. But this situation kind of talked about even the scope and the magnitude of who it affects. It's not just about a football team. It's not just about a winning or losing record. It's not just about what the sport can do in terms of creating opportunities, but it's the before and the afters. It's the 7-year-old kid in me that looked up at Big Mark Townsend, the head coach of the Mount Duck football team, when I watched my first game there, knowing he's an SFU football alumni, and saying, that's something I want to do. I could see myself being 45 years old, 50 years old, coaching a team, leading them to championships. But that only happens when you have the resume to do so, when you've gotten to finish some things out, when you get your degree, when you kind of settle back. And none of us are ready to settle right now. None of us are willing to hang up cleats or put the pads away just yet, especially when we were banking on something here. We all thought we had something going here. And so, I don't know, it's kind of a final thought. The support's incredible. The people online have been amazing. I would really, really pray and hope that the SFU administration, kind of like the Grinch, gets a little heartbeat going, gets a little growth in their chest there. Feels a little something warm and fuzzy in there for not just the players, but the families, the communities, the alumni, the coaches all across Canada and North America that are really pulling for this. And so kind of bring some heart to the situation. Yeah. I'd love to see some more emotion.
Well, I tell you, but
and really whoever solves this, like whoever fixes the situation is really going to be a hero to a lot of people too, like across Canada and North America. I'm really proud of you, Gideon.
I'm glad you said that, Mama, because I was going to say that you must be so proud of him, because to be a quarterback on a team, you got to be a leader, and you got to be a leader on and off the field.
Yeah.
And you send your son to university to be a leader, to grow as a man, and whatever this experience leads to, however it ends, I just see the makings of a great leader. Not in the typical fashion football typically creates leaders, but what you're doing, Gideon, I mean, hats off to you. You are becoming a leader amongst the men you lead on the field, but the community is watching. The community is following, and you're rising up from something that's tremendously tragic in the sense that it was out of your control, without consultation, and you're leading the charge for something good. And that's, you can't learn that in a book, and you can't even learn that on the football field. So you're getting an even more enriched experience because of this hardship that you're going through, and showing some tremendous resiliency. So Gideone, Lana, thanks so much for joining us. You should be tremendously proud. Our hats are off to you, and we're so honored to hear your stories for the first time for both Sheldon and I, but also honored to have a small part in amplifying the message and hopefully getting a positive result.
Thank you.
Thank you. No, it's incredible. It's incredible. All the help that counts, man. It all counts.
Well, that was absolutely amazing. I mean, I think it's so easy to lose track of the who and how it's affecting people and the families. Even the story about, let's not forget 35% of the team is American, and we're forgetting that those are football family kids there too that need to be taken care of. But Chevy, there's so much that was talked about. What were your thoughts on the whole situation? Start helping me break this down.
Yeah, since we've been following this story and getting this family's story, the Kremler story, it's clear that people were let down. A real failure to communicate, and I think what I'm hearing from them is, of course, there's the disappointment with the loss of the football team, but it was the way it was handled, and the way it's continually handled without any sort of consultation, without communication to the stakeholders. And your stakeholders are your students. Your stakeholders are the families. It's not, it shouldn't be done behind closed doors and then just dished out to the students while they're preparing for exams. So yeah, it's a really disappointing situation.
Have you ever experienced anything like that before?
No, I mean, I've never seen anything like that.
You know what it reminded me of, if I could, a few years ago, I was working for a very prominent brokerage in Calgary, and all of a sudden there's some rumblings that, rent checks weren't getting paid and something's going on with the company. No way, we're the biggest and the best in Calgary. Then one day, the CEO of our franchise comes in from Toronto and sits us all down and has that very corporate talk. Okay, guys, here's what happened. Brokerage went under. Here's what we're prepared to do for you. Here's what you can do for yourselves. And then all of a sudden everybody's in an uproar. What about our commission checks? What about our money? What about the people's money that we're holding for the deals? Oh, don't worry about it. Everyone here will be made whole, right? But keep moving on. And after 20 minutes, 15 minutes, you honestly got a bunch of positive words, but no action plans, no actual facts. There was nothing to actually tell us, what the next steps would be, other than what was best in corporate's best interest. As it turns out, a lot of it wasn't true. A lot of guys there's some big teams that were on hundreds of thousands of dollars. I think my point there is, though, CEO shows up, you got lawyers on board, and they give you the quick Coles notes and try to get you out of there as quickly as possible without anybody asking questions. They didn't like the lawyer there. They just wanted this all to go away. And you know what? Good on them. Families like this, the Alumni Association, and all the other prominent football names across the country have gotten behind this and are not going to let it just slip into the night.
Yeah, it's definitely not dying. I think if the Simon Fraser admin thought it was going to die and go quietly to the night, it certainly hasn't. I know we've been a voice to amplify the message, and we're a small voice. I mean, we know where we are. But there's some big voices, but this has traveled all the way down into the U.S. media, whether it's the New York Times, the Miami Herald. It's gone to the legislature. It's really spreading across Canada, and I hope that it accomplishes that ultimate goal of reversing the decision to scrap the football team. But like you mentioned, there is a lot of skepticism. If this university does not want to continue a football team, I don't see all the pressure in the world reversing that decision. I'd like it to happen, but I just don't know what petitions and hashtags and even a court injunction can do to make that a reality, even if it's beyond this year, right? So, I do think there was a failure in leadership, a failure in problem solving, a failure in trust. I mean, in the very least, you'd think that if they would have had an opportunity to play this 2023 season, the admin, the athletic department would have done everything in their power to give that team of student athletes one more opportunity to participate and do what they went to that school to do. And right now, anything less has got to feel empty for those players, for those coaches, and really for those families. We saw just how proud that family was to have 3 boys suit up for SFU. They bought the RV so they can go attend and tailgate the games. They're part of the family booster club, and those are the things that end with a decision like this, and that affects more than just those student athletes. It really affects the community. So, I was really...
And the football community across the country.
Absolutely. So, hats off to the Kremler family. I thought they were fantastic. I could have listened to them talk every day, and what a cool family. And you could tell that they're tight. And the great thing is they're going to get through this tight. And I hope that it gets the result that they want. And that was a great episode, Sheldon. For what we always say, great stories start great conversation. We certainly got some great stories from them today, and I think we had a pretty great conversation about this issue today.
Well, guys, I think we're going to wrap it up with that, but we're not going to let this issue die just yet. We got to talk to Jim Mullen, president of Football Canada. We've talked to families now involved and in part of the injunction. You know what? Another big part of this has been the alumni, and over the next coming days, we're going to reach out to some alumni members and see if we can get somebody on here to talk a little bit about maybe some inside information from the groups that are actually fundraising for these initiatives. But this ride is far from over. However, this particular ride is over. And once again, guys, we just want to say thank you for joining us. Thanks for listening. Like, subscribe, follow. We really appreciate you guys as Chevy and I have been growing this thing. It's been a lot of fun, but now we are out.